Zack, and I have no idea where you're calling from because there looks like a weird...
Is this Indiana?
Is it Germany?
No, this is from Idaho.
Idaho.
Hagerman.
Oh, okay, there's a slash in it, so I thought it said Hag/German ID, and who knows. Hagerman, Idaho.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on. I've been listening for a little while, seen some of the videos and stuff since about probably 2013, 2014. This is the first time I've called in.
Hey, what do you got for us?
I think that the idea that faith cannot be a valid mode of knowledge is, I guess I disagree with that idea.
Is there anything that you couldn't believe and attribute it to faith?
Is there anything that I couldn't believe and attribute it to faith?
Is there anything that one could not believe and just attribute to, I'm taking this on faith?
I guess not.
If that's the
I'm
case,
not sure.
Could somebody believe something that is false and attribute it to faith?
They could attribute it to faith.
Sure. So if somebody says, I believe this, and their attribution is faith, how do we tell whether or not it's true?
I don't think we can as outsiders. I don't think...
I'm going to take it on faith. I'm going to take it on faith that when I let go of this bottle of Coke Zero, that it's going to fall to the table.
Right.
It's either going to fall or it's not.
Right. I'd say that that's not something that's taken on faith generally, but I mean, if somebody says they're going to take that on faith, I mean, we don't have any mechanism for determining whether or not that's valid. And
sure we do. I can let go if
it
falls. That's how we find out whether or not something is true, by investigation, not by faith.
Right. That's through evidence.
But Matt's earlier point is if you can believe anything on faith, then it doesn't give you a guide to what's true or not.
Right. Well, you could believe everything on faith. I think that we're using faith in two different terms here. When a lot of believers talk about faith, they use it as you guys have described, and as I've heard other callers sometimes describe, as evidence for things unseen, that sort of thing, and just take that on faith. But I want to look at it in a slightly different light, like as sort of as another sense experience or another possible sense experience.
Okay, Zach, the problem we're going to run into, and I'll let you do this, but now we've got two different definitions of faith, which are fundamentally different. One you're going to describe as a sense experience, and the other one is belief in the absence of evidence.
Right, and I think that the two are often confused, and I think that they're often.
Why call a sense experience faith if faith is used in another way, and we already have the term sense experience?
Because I don't think that's because I think often when people hear the word faith, sometimes they can think, evidence, reason for belief in the absence of evidence. And other times when they hear it, they can think this sort of other sense experience of possibly spiritual realities.
What is this sense experience, and how do you know that it's real?
Well, the same way we could know any sense experience is real and is as valid as any other sense experience.
Cool.
To the person who has it, it's a valid.
Not cool at all. You just said we could validate it the same way we would any other sense experience, and we validate no other sense experience by merely taking the person at their word that their understanding of a sense experience. It's independent verification that validates the reliability of senses.
The idea of an ESP, and that's been well tested and found to be bogus.
ESP, sure. Yeah, I agree.
So
with
how
that,
does this differ from ESP?
And I'm not talking about the explaining it to another person, being able to have some sort of shared belief in something.
How do I distinguish this from a mind game?
Then I am absolutely not interested. I'm not interested in claims to personal truth. Truth is truth. The way we validate things is by independent confirmation, because the person who is suffering from delusions, who we have to lock up, they have what they're going to call their personal truth. If we're not going to care about the facts about a shared reality, I don't know why we're wasting time discussing it.
Okay, let me ask you this. If everybody, if 90% of the world is blind and 10% saw, would it be valid, or even less than that, say 1 in a million or something like that, were able to see?
Okay.
Would it be valid for those people to claim that they saw that they had knowledge of something that the others didn't? Not to convince them, not to convince the blind people, but for the person who believes it, or for the person who sees, would it be valid for that person to say he sees?
Well, first of all, I'm not keen on using the word valid here because it has a specific meaning and logic. But can they be can they be rationally justified in believing that they can see? Yes.
Right.
And the blind people can be validly justified in not believing it until they have evidence.
And they can engage in particular with other people who can see to validate that they're seeing correctly. And this is something that you can teach and demonstrate to people who cannot see through empirical evidence.
You can demonstrate, things like being able to perceive things at a distance and things like that. You can't explain color to a person who can't see. There's no.
So first of all, I'm not convinced that is true. What you're getting to is this notion of qualia, which there's something experiential about it. There's something that we can describe and demonstrate. For example, I can identify colorblindness in people, and I can find out who's not colorblind, and we can consistently demonstrate that some people are not colorblind. It doesn't change if the people who are colorblind are totally blind. The way to demonstrate this doesn't change. It's about being able to consistently produce results. Is this possible using the faith, sensus divinatus, whatever it is you're getting to?
Probably not in the same way.
Then why are we talking about it? Because you've said that you weren't interested in whether or not other people believed it, so it becomes a matter of personal experience and personal truth. And yet when we talk about these other senses, we're talking about independent verification and how we might demonstrate it to somebody who doesn't have those senses. And we pointed out already that those things are possible with other senses. So what is it about your special faith sense that even remotely compares to the things we discussed?
I have to say, like with colorblind tests, and stuff like that, there's no reason for a blind person to, suspect that a person actually can see color or that a person can't.
Yes, there is. There's the evidence for it.
We could render a spectrogram into Braille, for example.
There's a cool experiment with a tribe. They can see a distinction between two different colors of blue that I can't see a distinction between. Yeah, the tetrachromatics. Yeah. I'm willing to accept that they can see that distinction because the evidence consistently demonstrates that that's the case. I don't have to be able to see that distinction to be convinced reasonably that they can. If people of faith, even if they want to consider it a sense, wanted to, if their faith was a path to truth and understanding, first of all, we wouldn't have thousands of denominations all appealing to faith. But if they wanted to demonstrate reliably that they have access to some truth that the rest of us don't, that is at least theoretically possible. And yet it doesn't happen. What we get is varied revelations that are in conflict.
Okay, well, we could imagine, a sense experience, maybe not color, but I don't know, some sort of sense experience that can't be, independently verified.
Okay, first of all, we can imagine whatever the hell we want, but if there was a sense experience that couldn't be independently verified, how could you ever have warrant to trust it? How is it distinguishable from a delusion? If you can't independently verify it, it is indistinguishable from a delusion.
Okay. Oh, I guess that's true, but I mean, if we have, so you're saying that if we had those kind of sense experience, if people actually had those kind of sense experiences, they would, they would not be able to, they would not be rationally justified in actually trusting those experiences?
Yes, because, for example, if I see a vision appear in this room and I'm the only one who can see it, I have to question my own sanity. I have to question whether I'm seeing a vision or whether my brain is playing tricks on me. And if there's no way for me to investigate to determine if I've actually seen something real or if I've just perceived this, then I cannot have evidential warrant to believe that I saw it. I can believe that I had an experience because I did. I mean, that the properly basic thing is that I had some experience. But whether or not my mind's understanding of that experience maps to something about reality, that requires independent verification.
I see. All right, then.
That's why we end up locking. That's why we end up locking people up, because there are some people who experience strong delusions that, to them, based on the reports and the studies, are as functionally real as almost anything else they experience. And yet these things are not perceptible to the rest of us. We've identified, in some cases, problems with the brain, but in some cases we don't know why. But we do know that they're dangerous, and so we put them in protective custody.
I see.
So, I mean, for example, if God talks to you, and people say God talks to them all the time, and I usually ask, do they hear it audibly, or is this a feeling or an impression or something that happens in their brain? But in all of those, if God talks to you and tells you something, how can you be sure that God spoke to you and that this wasn't just a creation of your brain?
I don't have an answer for that right now. I'm going to have to consider that and call you guys back next week.
Well, I'm reminded of, when you go read about comic books and SpiderMan gets a special power of some sort, then the first thing he does is he tries it out a bunch of times and makes sure it's real, and then at some point he starts to use it and starts to benefit by it and starts to go off and do things, and the fact that he's out saving the world or whatever becomes evidence that other people can see. So
right,
that might be.
I mean,
that might be a path,
right? But I mean, if Spidey had some sort of sense of something that, I don't know, how is happening beyond the observable universe.
Spider-Man has Spidey sense, the sense of danger in a number of the comic books. And the way that we know that it's reliable is he consistently finds the danger that he sensed.
Right. Because
if any religious...
there's actual, you can compare it to other senses in a respect. You can validate it by appeals to things that happen around us and things we can affect.
Yep.
Right, but beware of confirmation bias.
I'm in complete agreement. I just need to, if there was some religious sense, it would need to have some demonstrated reliability and a mechanism.
That would be step one, right?
By which we could confirm it. And so far, I've got nothing.
Okay, all right.
Thanks, Zach.
That's I guess all I had. If I'm going to think about what you guys have said and possibly call back.
Sure. Thanks, Zach.
Bye.
As a reminder, anybody who wants to, atheist or atheist-friendly person who wants to join us for dinner, we'll be going to Star of India. We're on the air for another 20 minutes or so, and then we'll be heading over. You're welcome to join us. It's fun.
Yeah.
When I hear these things, in religious philosophy, there's this thing called the sensus divinatus, the divine sense. It essentially relates to getting direct revelations from God. And what some people, Zack didn't do this, so I'm not going to fault him for it. What some people will talk about, he did start to go down this road of, hey, there's 1 in a million people who aren't blind. Those people can verify with each other, but he seemed to imply that they couldn't verify to anybody else, and that's just not true. Let's say that only Southern Baptists are actually getting information from God, and that information that they get from God, with God being perfect, is accurate. That would be easy to demonstrate. Right. Most of these religions think that prayer, intercessory prayer, is useful. And yet we've tested it. And intercessory prayer works at the rate of chance, or I should say doesn't work had anything better than the rate of chance. It's exactly what you'd expect.
Yeah,
if
they
you
wouldn't
flip a
need
coin.
tax breaks. They could just go win the lottery every time they wanted some money.
Not only that, but if there was a single Christian denomination, or I'll just stick with Christian, if there was a single Christian denomination that had access to the truth and the power of God, the world would be fundamentally different. This would be easy to demonstrate. Either there's a God that interacts in reality in some demonstrable, detectable way, or there's not. And if there's not, I think you'll find that the world we live in is exactly what you'd expect if that God doesn't exist. People have asked me to defend the hard atheist position that there are no gods, and I will do it with very specific definitions. But the book that I'm working on is fundamentally about how this world is exactly what we'd expect if there is no God. We would expect confusion. We would expect people who believe things but cannot offer evidence for them. We would expect people making appeals to special ways of knowing that they couldn't reliably demonstrate. We would expect conflicting revelations that tend to agree with the person and the biases and the prejudices that they have. And we would expect, if there was a God, for a God to perhaps step in and correct all this. Hang on a second, you guys have got it all wrong and this shit is important, so let me get you the correction. But if we live in a world without a God, that doesn't happen. As far as I can tell, that doesn't happen.